Welcome to Ask Me Anything, a wonderful virtual NEWIEE program. We're going to give people a few minutes to come on to the webinar, and then we'll get started. It's an exciting program today, and we're looking forward to hearing from the commissioner and her journey to from her previous position to her role now at FERC. And we like it, Ask Me Anything, where we get to know the individual both on a personal as well as professional level. And it's going to be an exciting event, and we look forward to hearing your questions that you would like to ask of the commissioner. So throughout the conversation, please think of questions to ask of the commissioner, and in a few minutes we will get started. And we are getting there, but we do have a very large audience today, so I am going to give it a little extra time for people to join us. Probably another minute, and then we'll get started. You are logging on to Ask Me Anything, a NEWIEE virtual program, and today's presentation will be with the Commissioner, Allison Clements, from FERC. And we'll get started shortly. We're just waiting for more people to join, and then we will get started in one more minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask Me Anything. This is the latest version of Ask Me Anything. My name is Mary Yusevich, and I am on the board of NEWIEE, and I'm honored to moderate today's Ask Me Anything conversation with Commissioner Allison Clements. Today, Ask Me Anything is just one in a series of conversations we had, and with incredible leaders in the energy and environmental field. AMA events occur regularly on the second Wednesday of each month. Please go to the NEWIEE website, which is newie.org, to learn about all of our events, and in particular about the Ask Me Anything event. I have to say, we are so pleased to have the FERC Commissioner, but would not be possible if we did not have our sponsors. And like I want to do a shout out to the sponsors, because when COVID-19 happened, we had to go to a virtual platform, and we weren't able to do that without the wonderful sponsorship of Eversource, First Light Power Resource, Mass Clean Energy Center, and Robinson Coal. So I want to thank them. They're the ones who make these events possible, and we're very appreciative. Now I'd like to talk about how to ask questions. Please submit your questions for the commissioner. This is, if anybody's not been a part of Ask Me Anything, I rely on your questions to ask of her to keep the conversation going. So please put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. I will be only looking at the Q&A, and then I will ask those questions live of the commissioner. And finally, we have another AMA coming up next month on June 9th at 4 p.m. with a former commissioner of the Mass DPU, has now taken on a new role as the Environmental Defense Fund Director and Senior Attorney. And we're going to be talking about what she sees as the issues going forward for her organization, which is a wonderful NGO, and one that actually the new EPA secretary came from. So it'll be a very interesting conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to get us started today and invite the commissioner to join me so we can start asking some questions. Hello, Commissioner, how are you? And thank you so much again. This is wonderful for you to give up your time. We know how busy you are.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mary. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to get to know NEWIEE, and I'm just disappointed we're not in person, but hopefully that will be the case sometime soon.
Oh, I hope so too. It seems like it. We had the lowest number today of the deaths in the US. So it seems like we're getting closer to that time where we can be in person, but we appreciate this right now because you came on during a period of COVID. So you were approved and appointed and voted in, and now you've taken on the job. And I think you're in your office, right? So you actually have seen where you're going to work, right?
Yes, on the down low, I'm in the office.
Okay. But it's very hard though, because you haven't really been having much chance to interact with your staff, right?
That's right. Some of my, so the commissioners who are not chair have a team of 6, and 4 of them now I've met in person. 2 of them I still haven't had the chance to actually see beyond the screen. So it's an interesting way to start a job. If any of you switch jobs during this time, you know what it feels like.
Oh, and it's interesting too, because it's not only interesting you came in the period of COVID, but you came from not usual ranks of what normally the commissioners come from. Usually they're from the utility or the regulatory side. But your background, for the most part, was in the Natural Resource Defense Council in New York. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, is coming from an NGO, where do you think that provides in terms of your role now as a FERC commissioner?
Sure. Well, I'm thrilled to be here, number one. And I think actually that it's important that we broaden the set of perspectives of the commissioners. We are here to serve the public interest. And I think each of the 5 of us who are on the commission now bring an important perspective. And so I'm glad to be part of that. I certainly didn't think at the beginning of my career that would be the case based on what you just described. I did spend 5 years in private practice at a law school. So I had regulatory experience, and I also did some project finance on the transactional side for a bit, and then went to NRDC for 10 years, spent a couple of 3 years as their corporate counsel, so in an institutional role, and then the rest of the time as focused on these regulatory issues. And then after that, I left and spent some time doing my own consulting business and spent some time in a foundation. So I've kind of had a bucket. Certainly, the NRDC experience, runs deep in terms of where I learned to do the work that we are all focused on. But it's at the time I made that choice to leave private practice, I actually was cognizant of the fact, it wasn't that many years ago, but I was cognizant of the fact that I was cutting off some opportunities. And I didn't say I want to be a FERC commissioner when I grow up, but I did know that these are really exciting issues. The state regulators and the federal regulators in our space play a really important role. And I knew at the time I was shutting a door. And then it turns out, the world changes, politics change, markets change, and here we are.
Well, and this is interesting because I would like, a lot of people might not understand what the role of the Natural Resource Defense Council, and because people have raised the issues that stakeholders need to have a voice, because this is a very important time now. We're coming into a situation where the environment and energy and transportation are all interconnected and really important to the future of our country. So when you were there, where did you see as the major issues that you can now bring with you to the FERC?
Sure. Well, if you're on this call today, you think FERC matters, or you've known about it, I guess, at least, but that was a well-kept secret for a very long time. So a lot of what I did was trying to explain to clean energy advocates and clean energy policy wonks why FERC matters and the role of both the federal and the state regulators in implementation of any environmental policy. Not that these regulators make the policy, but that certainly the way that we operate have implications for success on those policies. And I feel like a lot of times I'm still trying to do that today, but I was an electric side expert, so I didn't work on the gas pipeline issues, which clearly increasingly and kind of after I left NRDC, there have been a lot of focus on it and frankly, a lot of controversy around. But just the idea that passing a policy, I guess for me, what was important during that period is this idea that passing a policy is the starting line, not the finish line. So if you're going to be a state like many of the states in New England who are putting out ambitious offshore wind policy targets, for example, or across the country committing to 100% clean goals, the day that we have a party, the day the legislation gets signed, and then the work begins. And so that's a piece that I think if you understand that, if you're someone in the electricity or energy industry who starts from that understanding, it gives you a leg up in a lot of these discussions in terms of the best, or one of the best or appropriate paths forward.
So is that kind of the theme you're going to take for these upcoming technical conferences that you have regarding the markets, to try to, influence this like kind of understanding, broader reach? Is that part of what your goal is for those?
Sure. There are a lot of technical conferences happening at the commission right now. They have a chart up on the website so you can keep track. And they're really important. Chairman Glick hit the ground running and is taking us down important paths of consideration related to end-use electrification, which is held a technical conference on, related to climate change and extreme weather, which is clearly a very important and timely issue. We have one coming up on Western resource adequacy. Again, none of this is unrelated. And of course, the technical conferences you might be referring to on market design in the Eastern RTOs, including New England, which is coming up within a month. So I do bring that perspective. I think the important thing, and perhaps because I had a really long confirmation process, I had a lot of time to think about, it doesn't matter what job you had before. It doesn't matter if you worked at a utility or you were a state regulator or you were at a nonprofit. I just got pushed really hard in the confirmation process of, can you be objective? And I think that's the important part. Yes, in this role, that is my job, to be objective on the issues. So I certainly bring that experience to the table in these conversations, but hope that what I contribute to across this commission of 5 is to elucidating perspectives that help us make good choices, per our jurisdictional obligations.
Well, I do have a question here from one of the people who have coming on, and they said, how will DERs change net metering? In particular, will virtual net metering become a larger sector of the energy economy, and will virtual net metering be featured in net metering reform?
Let's get right into it. I don't want to say anything that is pending or ex parte. I think that, but I will speak to the perspective that I at least start with at the commission when we are thinking about these issues. The energy industry has changed really slowly for a long time, and all of a sudden, maybe you call it 2 decades, maybe we call it 1 or less, it's happening really fast, and that's exciting. And we need to be smart about how we enable that innovation. And like in any marketplace, the innovative approaches often win, are often the disruptors, and often change the playing field. In the case of distributed energy resource and the potential to aggregate them, that is also the case. This is a really hard nut to crack, right? We've got companies who work on behavioral approaches to residential potential demand response. We have the industrial customers who've been like, we've been doing this for years. It's just smart. It's just dollars and cents that we're trying to save. And I think the commission has taken an important step in issuing Order 2222, which provides that the markets must remove barriers to participations by these resources. I think the implementation process will tell how big a step forward that is relative to the ability of these innovative players in the market to adapt and then succeed. So I think I think the jury's out.
I think that's a good question to follow up. Like, do you see that we have had huge advancement? The biggest thing I was wondering if you comment on is, how do we get over everyone having their own little silos? Like, everyone's kind of in their own little space. How do we get people to see that it's the energy/environmental, community that we're creating?
Yeah, you mean more broadly, or in the sense of distributed energy resources conversation?
Well, just more broadly, because I know you can't comment on that, but maybe how do we get everyone to see the holistic picture, how everything interconnects, and it's one thing. You can't just take care of this over here, because it then affects 5 things over here. And how can we get that to be perceived as that this is a holistic, system?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's been eras of the system, right? There's the era where the nuclear power came on, and where hydro and pump storage were developed alongside it. And there's the era in the early 2000s where there was the gas boom and a lot of merchant gas development in the East. And now we're in the different era. And I guess when I started in this industry 20 years ago, you couldn't actually find a renewable deal at the law firm if you tried. You had to like dig, you had to, it was kind of that, cheap, like not a very good client because they probably won't be able to pay you much money over time, and you'll volunteer to do it because you're young and eager. And now we have a whole, like now the energy industry isn't like old, original, dirty, clean. It's just the energy industry, and all of these resources are on the table, and they all are probably going to be, they are likely in some way or another to have a part in the energy transition that the markets are driving right now and the policy is driving. So first of all, from that perspective, we're all kind of in it together, to the extent that you take the position, or you believe, as I do, that we want to protect customers and reliability in the energy transition. So that's one way. I think when you think about whether or not issues like transmission planning and interconnection policy and resource adequacy and market design related to that, how those things are all interconnected, that's a really important story that I don't necessarily have, I haven't nailed down in terms of the good words, but I'd love to hear your ideas on that.
No, it is interesting. Well, it follows up on a question that it seems to be very near to my heart. It's like, what are the hopes of the FERC Office of Public Participation? What do you see as their biggest challenges for that office to get those voices heard, and that everyone's voices are heard, not just the people who scream the loudest? So how do you see that office evolving to ensure that you do have across the board participation?
Yeah. Well, this isn't a pun to your question, but one is Congress told us to set up this office. Doesn't really matter if we have a vision or not. But I do have, that's more to lead up to this idea that we all have an instinct that government can be more responsive to people. And the commission's decisions implicate people, and they implicate different kinds of people at different times. And we're not going to have a perfect world where every person who is implicated by an infrastructure decision or a rate design decision or any other decision of the commission will have their voice heard, but there's a lot between here and there. And so how do we set up an opportunity for landowners, consumer advocates, people living in environmental justice communities, and others to have access to our proceedings in a way that is fair, that helps them to participate? It's not meant to set up kind of a separate parallel system at the commission, as much as it's to say, we have these proceedings, they're hard, trust me, we know they're hard. So let us help you get in them, so that you are on the record as well, and that the commission can make more informed and more durable, legally durable, and just, humanly durable decisions.
Well, I know you have 2 children that are young, and you know how important education is. Do you think that there's an opportunity for us to do some energy literacy? Because I would guarantee you, if you went out your office today and stopped 5 people on the street and asked them, how did you power that phone today? They'd say, I just plugged it in with a charger. Well, where did that, electricity come from? That would be they'd probably get to the pole on the street, and that's about maybe it. So has there any thought about energy literacy to get people to understand this very complicated industry? Because it isn't very, as you said, it's gone through evolutions, and as it's gone, it's become more complicated.
I just love that question, because that's what, as an advocate, in my mind, it was translation. At least 50% of the job was just saying, these are a bunch of jargony words you don't understand. This is why you should matter. When you flip your light switch on, when you plug your iPad in, something happens. That's not just magic, right? So I really appreciate that question. I think in the context of the Office of Public Participation, the education component in my mind is the most straightforward, down the middle, a middle drive in terms of what it should be doing.
Awesome. We have another question here on what we're talking about. ERCOT during that February 2021 highlighted reliability exposures driven by extreme weather. What would be considered basic tailored and risk in terms of probabilities? Has the unfortunate incident informed FERC to consider needed changes in the industry? Would we hear more about FERC's thoughts on the coming June 1st and June 2nd technical session? Is there anything you'd like us to consider think about the June technical sessions? So it was. I had to actually, I had neighbors ask me about it because they were all of a sudden very interested. Like, could that happen to us? It did raise that concern that people could not believe when they were turning on the TV what was happening.
Yeah,
So-
and it's an exact follow-on. Sorry to interrupt, Mary.
No, go ahead.
It's an exact follow-on from your last question, which is the time that people care is when things go wrong, and we're seeing that in a separate context with the Colonial Pipeline this week. I will say, no one at FERC has stopped talking about what happened in Texas. The chair's office and staff kind of got together immediately, and there was constant communication with the regions. That we have different authority over MISO and SPP, which were implicated relative to Texas, but there's still reliability authority. So there's an inquiry underway on the reliability issues, and I think, like we started, none of these things are unrelated. So I'm not sure if you're referring to the climate and extreme weather technical conference. I think that's the one you're talking about.
I think that's the one there, June 1st.
Yeah. Yes, this is a place to raise these issues, and it's the kind of questions we're thinking about. It's a broad set of questions. We're not going to say, oh, we've learned so much today, let's tie it up in a bow and open a docket and we'll fix it with this one rule, because these are reliability issues, they're transmission system issues and planning issues, and they're market design issues, and so and operations issues. So I hope what it starts to do is crystallize the priority buckets of issues, if you will, so that we can start taking on.
And hopefully raise awareness of the most important thing we have, which is reliability and, and communication and all of that. But understanding that is the role of what we're trying to do at the regional ISOs, is to provide reliability so that people don't freeze and people can still have electricity to live their lives. So, it is a very difficult and complicated situation. We have another question here on I just have to answer a few of these. What I'd like to do is more talk about also on your personal life, just as a woman in the leadership role at FERC, being you're the commissioner that basically is the only female commissioner right now. And do you see that as hopefully something that will change, or will there be more opportunities for hopefully more women commissioners?
Sure hope so. I've learned since I got here, or in this process, that I'm the 10th woman to be appointed since these appointments started in 1930. More realistically, since the FPC became FERC. There's been 4 women chairs and an acting chair. There's been 2 African-American women. The average has been 22% of the commissioners have been women. So overall, we have a lot of work to do. I will say, women who have been chairs and commissioners, especially your own chairman and Commissioner LaFleur, have been really generous and gracious, as well as Commissioner Honorable, have been really, really kind and supportive, and helped me get a perspective on how to come at the job.
Well, and it's interesting you said that, because one of the things that I thought that Commissioner LaFleur did was that she was always available to come out and speak to the different organizations. I know with COVID that's restricted you, but do you see that as also a role that you'll be playing, which is to really come out, take the message of FERC and the issues surrounding that you're dealing with on a daily basis, and bring it out to the different RTOs? That's one thing she did, a lot of traveling. I know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Well, as a woman, I want to create the community like you all do, right? That is really important, and something that I strive for as well. I'm looking for those opportunities. I think as a FERC commissioner, when I started, I thought, oh, well, one of the silver linings of COVID is that I don't have to travel, so I can just talk to all these groups, right? So I did a whole bunch of speaking engagements, but it's not satisfying. You don't get to stay and listen to the panel afterwards, and you don't block out the whole day and get to have lunch with people and just learn about what they're thinking. And so much of our understanding and kind of the ether of where we're all going together happens in those hallways and at those lunch tables and over cocktails. And so I I think I'm certainly ready to get going again. And I don't know, we'll see if there's a boom and everyone's ready to go and the conferences are packed, or if we take a more, timid approach.
Well, as at NEWIEE, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we would love to have you come and be a part of one of our NEWIEE events in person. How well do you, as well as other commissioners, view PGM's minimum office price rule? And how will FERC's 2019 ruling on the impact other RTOs in opinion? And I understand, you can make the statement, but as much as you want to answer that.
I should have said at the beginning that all of these comments are my own and not those of the commission. I have been vocal on my displeasure with the evolution of the MOPR from where it started as a buyer side, on the merits, but also the evolution from buyer side mitigation to the general concern on price suppression and what that has meant for from a state's perspective. And we've had in our a technical conference similar to the one we will be holding with New England stakeholders in the Mid-Atlantic and the PJM region on this very topic. And it feels like the world is moving on from the MOPR as a mechanism for these purposes. Where we are going to go is, I think there's emerging consensus that it's time to move away, and that was demonstrated in the technical conference. Where we're going, I think that the consensus ends pretty quickly, and so I think there is a near-term desire to get to move on, but I wouldn't risk predicting what comes next.
Well, we have a question here about when did you take an interest in a government role? And it sounded like when we first started talking about this, that was not something that was even in your original goals and objectives. So when did all of a sudden, I guess the question is, how did you all of a sudden go from, oh, I think I'd like to become a FERC commissioner? I guess people don't understand, how does one become a FERC commissioner, and what's behind the scenes of that?
Well, if you really want to be a FERC commissioner, call me. We'll go for lunch. It's funny. So, in whatever your family unit is or your community unit, you make decisions at different times in life, and different things fit. And we had been in New York for a decade, and my husband had been there for 20 years, and we wanted out. We had our second kid, and we're like, well, this is nuts. We don't have family here. It's super expensive. Like, daycare is like blowing our mind in terms of cost. Let's go west. So we went to Salt Lake and lived there for almost 7 years. And, that was for the role that my husband had chosen. And that we decided as a family, I could do my job remotely and he would do that. And so I had some nice kind of downtime. I worked from home, for 6 years before the pandemic, and just felt like there was a real ton of work to do on these issues, on market design that we were just talking about, on system planning and the FERC issues, and I wanted to help people do it for now. And so that part was fun. It was freeing. I got to kind of just be a policy wonk and say what I think. And then literally I still had all my friends in the community, and it's like a mix of skill, politics, and luck. It's the Green New Deal had come out. There was a desire to bring a perspective on clean energy. And look, our Chairman Glick worked for a renewables company. Lots of our Commissioner Christie is a state regulator. It's not as though the rest of the commission doesn't bring that perspective. But in any case, they were looking for a set of boxes to check, and I fit the bill. And I was driving downtown to Salt Lake, and my friend texted and said, "Do you want to be a FERC commissioner?" And I just kind of laughed and said, "Ha, sure." And 3 hours later, I was on the phone and got a call from Capitol Hill. So depending on what kind of perspective is needed on the commission at any given time, the pool may shrink.
Yep. Well, and I love that you sharing that story with us, because Commissioner LaFleur did the same thing. She always tells the people the story about, I just got a phone call one day and someone said, "Do you want to be a FERC commissioner?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds like fun." And and lo and behold, she did become a commissioner. So it is interesting to hear that, how in your career this is not something you planned. This is an opportunity that came about. And so if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that, because whenever I have someone on AMA, especially for the young professionals, it's like, what kind of advice can you give them about that? Like, is be open to anything that comes your way, or have a hard and fast plan? You know, what would you advise?
Yeah, everybody's different. I love to hear your version. I've acted on my gut, and that has served me well. It has also times where it's caused mistakes, where I kept a job for 3 weeks once, where my gut, actually in that case, my gut probably knew it was wrong, but I think you can make a difference in the world from a lot of different perches. And the factors that go into your decision making might block off some of those perches. If you have law school loans, like I did when I got out of school, then you might not go take a nonprofit job. If you want really great training that you can't get anywhere else, you might go to a law firm. If you are a power grid geek, I don't know how many young people are playing that board game, you might want to go work at a utility straight out of college. Like, everybody has a different set of factors. Your family might want to live in one place, and so the geographic opportunities are limited, although that's changing. Whatever the set of factors are that go into your decision, you're not closing doors with each choice you make. It's not like I didn't say it would be cool to be it just wasn't a time in my life where the FERC commissioner opportunity was even on the radar or made sense necessarily in my first couple of moves. And so I went through the set of doors that kind of presented themselves to me and felt like at that moment in time for me, and then later for my family, made sense. And I guess if there's anything useful in that, it is you're not making a choice for the rest of your life. Even increasingly people stay at jobs for shorter periods. You should be committed when you make a decision and go into it, but you're not deciding the next 30 years of your life. And the experience is so rich in so many different places that especially in the industry today, it's kind of hard to go wrong.
Well, and it's true. And then you made a good point, is sometimes you have to make sacrifices for your family. It sounded like when you went to Salt Lake City, that you did that for your husband, and then you had to adapt. Is your husband having to find a position now that you're in Washington?
Yeah, he's doing lots of things. My job is taking priority right now. He still has stuff to do, and he's got a job. And every Sunday night we fill out our weekly planner, and for the 6 year, like with who's doing drop off, who's doing pickup, who's making dinner, or at least who's responsible for dinner, ordering dinner. And for 6 years, that was me. And now it's his turn. And so it's hard. Like, not everyone has that option, but you just have to figure out which moment in time it is and make a call based on what you're able to do. So I appreciate that I'm lucky in that.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that with us, because people like to get to know the person, in these positions. So thank you for sharing that with us, because we do have some more questions again on the DER aggregate. And I'll combine the two of them because people really want to know about the DER aggregates, and particularly about creating them on the local wholesale energy market.
Know about them in general?
Well, they said basically, how can we help munis basically create these aggregate local DER and in terms of the energy market?
Every region is different, and there are market players trying to figure that out, right? Much smarter than I am on these issues. A fascinating set of conversations I thought we had during the End Use Electrification Technical Conference that the Commission held a couple weeks ago. You can probably find it online. Was the idea of everything that exists between state and federal jurisdiction. So jurisdictionally, legally, operationally, from a coordination perspective and a communications perspective, the way that a distribution system utility engages with a regional operator and communicates and coordinates, or not. I don't know how much coordination we need. The questions about investments that get made at the retail level that bear fruit, certainly on the on the at the wholesale level? And how do you think about that? What's the right way for states to protect their customers while also making investment that enables them to succeed in these emerging markets and reap the benefits of those savings? So I'm pretty fascinated right now by that line between the two realms, and appreciating that as the Federal Power Act piece of it has grown over the last decade, we've talked about growing pains and the blurred line between state and federal jurisdiction. And I don't necessarily think that's anymore exactly the right framing. We're figuring a lot of it out. Now it is, okay, we understand a lot of these jurisdictional lines. How do we leverage the authority or the opportunity that exists across the two to get good outcomes?
Well, and that brings me to the next kind of questions that that I want to ask you, which is like, we've heard from your other members of the commission of FERC who've been there, with you being the new person on. If you had to, this was your first speaking engagement, you were trying to introduce yourself to the audience that's on this call today. I mean, what would you say, when you came to take this job at FERC, you said, I would love to make these my priorities. I would like to see us get this change. I've been struggling with this issue, and I'm now in a position where I can actually influence. And I was just wondering if you could share with us, when you said yes, the person said, you know, do you want to be a FERC commissioner? You know, what was in your thought, in your mind? Because I can think about myself, you know, about, wow, I've been dealing with these top 3 issues my life. I would love to have an opportunity to do. So if you could share with us, that'd be great.
Sure. I guess I have 2 different answers. The first is that a lot of what I cared about is happening. Like, how exciting is that, right? We're taking steps forward on market design to bring it into the reality of these state policy drivers, these utility commitments, these corporate customers, these communities. You know, that's happening to some extent. We're thinking about the transmission system design issues, and so I can tick off all of those substantive areas, and they are priorities. They're important, and I'm grateful to be at the commission at a time when, you know, Chairman Glick has agrees and decides they're important, and so let's go. Another thing, and I've been asked that question a lot, and I've said that a lot. I guess another way to say it is, we have this chance to navigate the energy transition in a smart way. We have the chance to make this customer forward. We have this chance to allow for individual preferences and state preferences to flourish. And all we have to do is be smart and innovative and bring that spirit that exists all across the United States on a whole bunch of different issues to our industry. And I feel that in the, you know, like when these things like the offshore wind announcement from the administration yesterday comes out, there's just such an excitement and an opportunity that, if done well, we have all these benefits that we can bring to bear. And so I guess the nicer, more exciting way to say my priority is, let's do this well. You know, let's not make it a fight between this state and this state. Let's figure out who benefits from what things, and you know, work together and get it done. So
yeah, so it brings me to another thing. Since you did say that a lot of change is happening, which is for the positive, and it's great, but being a person that came from the role of an NGO and understanding that, you know, stakeholder involvement, building anything, anywhere, any place. I forget what they call it. It's a banana, build nothing, nowhere, anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, should we take a step back and think about how to preserve some of the things that we have? And because they'll never get built again. I mean, and I'm just thinking about how we have so much retirement up here in the Northeast of our power plants. And there is the possibility that either a new synthetic fuel comes along that somebody's working in a lab, or even possibility of hydrogen. So how do we make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as we move into this new world?
Sure. I mean, there's my general perspective on that question, and there's what's FERC's role in determining the answer to that question. To me, everything's on the table. New England is unique, as you all know, much better than I do, in terms of its reliance on natural gas and the role that the various types of generation play, and the imports and exports, and as well as the opportunity that comes from transmission investment. And to your first point, all infrastructure has implications. So it doesn't matter if you're building a generation plant or a gas plant or a solar farm or an oil pipeline or an electric transmission line, you have impacts to people when you build things. And so that's a reality, and that's why we need to be really careful and do it well. And that involves whole of government approach at many levels. And it's maybe, you know, as we're seeing in these infrastructure fights on Capitol Hill, one of the ultimate challenge, a huge challenge, right? And then there's the idea that if we're looking at the future and how to protect customers, well, all of these forces are demanding a transition of the kind of energy and the kind of fuels that support them. Everything should be on the table. Why would you take anything off the table that could happen to support reliability and provide customers with savings and benefits relative to the changing fuel mix, or at least the changing expectations around emissions from that generating mix? And then what's the role of the commission in that? The commission doesn't get to choose. The commission has a role in protecting customers, and therefore lower cost solutions relative to what exists and what doesn't yet exist come into play. And that will be true at the state level as well. And then of course, reliability. And to the extent there's a reliability issue, that's first and foremost, and you don't get to take things off the table related to reliability.
And I guess the other question to follow up on that is that there's a lot of conversation going on that the states are doing their own thing, and then you have the RTOs and FERC trying to manage it. Do you see that there's this kind of dynamics going on that, you know, that could cause maybe problems, or can it all work out for, you know, in a positive way? Or do you maybe see some foreshadowing that there could be some concerns?
Is there drama coming down the pike? I don't know. I think New England is its own set of states and its own RTO, and certainly the issues that you experience and the policies that your states are passing and the customers and the, you know, suppliers who operate in your states, all of that matters first and foremost. I feel like we're just, and I'm lucky because I missed a lot of this fight in this role, we're coming out of that time. It's not the states versus the states or the states versus FERC. I think. Great. I feel like we're reaching a point where your utilities are making commitments about changes they want to make on their system. Your operators of data centers who bring economic benefits to your states and communities are making decisions. At the same time, communities are finding their voice when they're implicated by these decisions, right? And increasingly places in government are trying to help facilitate those voices and include voices that have been left out of these conversations in the past. So I hope that we're kind of all not there. I guess there will continue to be the states on our issues on the regulatory front who don't like what FERC's doing, and they make that clear. There's a whole bunch of states who want to do what they're trying to do as cost effectively as possible. And there's that coalition of the willing that I think is just emerging and really important relative to what we're trying to do. I don't want to rose color it, but I'm hopeful that will be true.
Well, this brings me to another question someone asked, because if looking at your background, which it's great, it's fantastic, the work that you've done, but you went from, working for yourself, kind of being a small business at some point when you went to Salt Lake City. And now you're in a role of being a FERC commissioner with a lot of staff, with a lot of, people, giving you advice and all. How has that change been? Well, first of all, it's been COVID, so it's all been primarily virtual. But do you find that has a benefit to it by getting a ton of information and working with the staff and relying on their expertise? Because that was a question someone had, is like, that must have been a major change for you.
It is. It's a great question, and I appreciate you thinking of it. For those of you who, like me, I love these consulting firms. I was the president of my consulting firm. It was just me. I partnered with other people, but
join the club. That's me. I'm president of MU Connection, so I know that feeling.
And not to be gender implicating, but no man would feel the need to correct that perception. But I just gotta say, It's just me and my
I
friends.
have to tell you, that's an interesting point, because people always ask me, MU connections, I mean, what? And I said, well, it's me. And they're like, oh, you're the president? And I go, no, I'm the principal. So why do women do that? No man would ever have said that. He would have said, yeah, I'm the president. I own the company. I ran it. I started it. So that is an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and he was also the IT and the janitor and the landlord and the lessee. I'm sure there's lots of literature we could read and follow up on that front.
Totally.
But I've been a manager. We have oops, sorry, my calendar happened. We have I had a small team at a nonprofit, and now I have a small team with a bigger job. Like, it is a big job, and it's again, I think I went through a 2-year confirmation process, or waiting period before the confirmation process. So a lot of the fears kind of ebbed and flowed over time, and the questions about what it would be like. And by the time it came, I was like, let's just get this show on the road. We have things to do. So it's a new experience. I'm certainly learning, and I'm certainly trying to have to take an approach where I know a lot already. I come into this role with a lot of knowledge on the issues. I also have a lot to learn about how government works, and how the goods and the bads of bureaucracy go, and what that means, and what it means to try and inspire a team who are there to help you further what you think those priorities are that you asked about before. So I've had lots of hard days, but it's all pretty exciting.
Well, and you speak about a team, and something at NEWIEE that we're working very hard on is DEI. And, NEWIEE got started 13 years ago with Judy Chang, and, commenting that there were no lines at the ladies' room when you went to any energy conference. So that just showed how few women there were involved. So look at the makeup of FERC now and the staff. Would you say, we already talked about you being the only woman FERC commissioner. Only 22% of all FERC commissioners have been women. What about people of color? Would you say FERC is diverse and is representative of, the population it serves?
Yeah, I think yes is the starting point. Is there room for improvement? I think yes. I am starting in COVID, as you said, so I don't get to walk through the halls and meet people. I have the interaction with the people who are, leading a program office, or who are point on a particular order that we're trying to learn more about. And I will say we have a great group of senior women across the commission, like really impressive women leading offices, who I think, wow, like they've really got it going on, and they have hard jobs, and they do them well. On the diversity front, I know that over the last few years, there's been increasing awareness across government, period. I think Chairman Chatterjee started an effort that it initiated diversity training. I think Chairman Glick is moving that forward. There's always more to do on that front, but I forget sometimes, even though like we know being women in this industry and not waiting in the bathroom lines and has changed some, it hasn't changed that much. And but it's nice to have this kind of community where we get to talk about it and understand that we are in it together, and we have the ability to support each other and to start influencing those outcomes.
Well, that's great. And we hope, because it is a goal of NEWIEE, that we love to see everyone thinking about DEI and making it a priority, and especially with looking at how energy does impact in the environmental justice communities, and thinking in those aspects of what we can do. So on that, I just wanted to know do you see that as an issue on the environmental justice, that for the most part, these facilities that gave us this great resource of energy was built in areas that impacted people that were less advantaged?
I have had the chance to meet with some of those people in those communities. I certainly read the stories and have studied the issues. As a commissioner making decisions about infrastructure, I'm new. And so I don't have experience kind of going through a process from beginning to end. Certainly there's all sorts of decisions that get made outside the commission that also implicate communities, and they tend to get piled on. So I think I have a lot to learn. I wouldn't pretend to add any more, but I will. I know that the chairman announced a new senior position at the commission that will not be a position within the Office of Public Participation. That is a senior role to focus on environmental justice issues and the environmental justice implications of commission decision-making processes, and that's really exciting to me.
That is extremely exciting, and we're so glad. I'm so glad you were able to, reinforce that announcement, because that's important for the community to know that FERC has been hearing that this is an issue, and that the chairman has done that. So that's excellent. I do have one more technical question. Someone wanted to know, any chance of getting a pilot program for the DER aggregate?
Oh, the DER.
Back to the DER. Someone just won't let it go. They just keep on, they want to make sure that you get that somehow they can say, could you give us a pilot program at least on this?
Yeah.
So I won't hold you committed to it, but it is, somebody out there would love to get an opportunity to do a pilot program.
Yeah, a lot of the opportunities for pilot programs tend to exist on the distribution system level. So in my mind, in all of this, so in the FERC jurisdictional world, if we're going to facilitate interconnection queues of, getting close to 800 gigawatts of location constrained resources right now, if we're going to cost effectively interconnect the 14 gigawatts of wind that New England states have committed to procuring over time, then we need to make sure, one, that we are investing in the cheapest resources first, so that we're not, overbuilding the system. So that's energy efficiency, that's responsive demand, and anything that you can do with DER aggregations. It also, we need the flexibility, and in my mind, there's such an important role for demand to play on that front. I think that's one of the issues that we will hone in on at this extreme weather and climate change technical conference. So maybe that's the next place to tune in.
That is a great place to tune in. Well, believe it or not, I told you when we were talking about putting this together that the hour would go by so fast, and that you'd be like, oh my God, it's been an hour. Well, we are coming to the last question, which anybody who's watched these AMAs knows that I ask every one of my guests this a particular question, and that is, can you think of the best advice that you got? What was it? And did you follow through, or did you not?
Well, so my parents are very old school and had very high expectations for their 4 children. I had a homeroom teacher in high school, and he made us all stand up every morning and recite these 3 large statements, like these very grandiose statements. And I can't remember the first and the third, but the second was, don't settle for mediocrity. We'd have to say, no, I will not settle for mediocrity. And that's always been kind of, as affirmed by my parents. I don't know if I've succeeded, but, I do think that we have some amount of time to try and make a difference. And like I said, there's lots of different ways you can do that, different perches in our world. And so I'm striving to achieve that advice over time.
And that advice came from a teacher.
My homeroom teacher. He was also the debate coach and the homeroom teacher in high school.
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Education is a really key component, and it sounds like you're following through it. And if you had to give another piece of advice to any young professional who's out there thinking about, because we have a lot of people on today's call that are people thinking like, do I want a career in energy? Can you give them any aspect that, yeah, this is the right career, you're in the right place?
Go for it. I think we have just the amount of work and the relative group of people we need to triple, quadruple, really, really exponentially grow the number of women and people working in our field. And there's just so many places, don't be discouraged, because there's been all this, whether or not you take the first opportunity and get the coolest job and in with the right place, don't worry, like go learn this stuff somewhere, and then you'll have lots of opportunities.
And overcome, don't settle for mediocrity.
Don't settle for me. And come to FERC. It's a great place to work.
Come to FERC. It's a great place to work. There's a new Office of Public Participation.
And there's
staff of environmental justice. It seems like there's a great opportunity there. Well, Commissioner, I can't thank you enough, because you know, even with COVID, you have a family, you have 2 small children, you have a husband, you have this huge staff that you have to manage, and all of these technical conferences coming up and all this work. And yet you took the time today to, you know, carve out an hour to talk to us at Ask Me Anything on NEWIEE. So I can't thank you enough for that. It's really appreciative. And I do want to remind everybody that we have the next NEWIEE event is next month, June 9th. I know you know former Commissioner Westbrook, who you've had a lot of questions about, so it's great. And I just want to remind people that when we close off tonight, instead of sending you a survey, you're going to get a link right away to the survey. We really ask you to spend the time filling out these surveys so that we can continue having guests like we have with the commissioner today, or if there's other people that you would like us to basically invite as well. And please, Commissioner, if you have any thoughts of other people that we should also have, maybe the new Office of Public Participation or the new chief person who's involved in the environmental justice, we would love to give them this format for them to educate, inform, and inspire women in this field and make them really become the next leaders, because we really appreciate you giving your time to show what the leadership we have in women in this energy and environmental sector. So I would like to thank again our sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't have this program. So that's Eversource, First Light Power and Resource, Mass Clean Energy Center, and Robinson Clell. And I want to also extend to you, Commissioner, again, that the first opportunity where NEWIEE can have an in-person live, where we can have those informal conversations at the lunch or on the buffet. Well, I guess they're going to get rid of buffets. I guess it's going to be box lunches. But when we have an opportunity to sit and have a box lunch together, we would love to have you as a guest. Maybe it'll be after a couple more months and a few more technical conferences. And we would love to extend that to you so that our members can get to meet you in person.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And again, thank you everyone for joining me today and Ask Me Anything. And please join me again on Wednesday, June 9th, 4 o'clock. And we'll hear from the Environmental Defense Fund's lead attorney, former Commissioner Jolette Westbrook from the Mass DPU. So have a good evening, everyone, and enjoy this beautiful day. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.